What if the decision you thought was the safest ended up costing you more than you ever imagined? What if the choice meant to bring comfort quietly began taking away the very things that make you feel alive? And what if, without realizing it, moving in with your children slowly chipped away at your independence, your identity, and your peace of mind? For many older adults, the idea of living with their children feels like the natural step as they age. It's often seen as practical, economical, and rooted in love and family support. On the surface, it makes perfect sense. Why not be surrounded by the people you love most? Yet beneath that surface, something deeper and more complicated begins to unfold, something few ever talk about openly. In this video, we're going to explore 8 specific ways moving in with your children can quietly erode your independence, your sense of self, and even your inner peace. These are experiences shared by millions, though rarely spoken out loud. And I want you to stay with me until the very end. Not only because these insights may help you make wiser decisions for the future, but also because they may give you permission to protect your own space, set healthy boundaries, and feel whole again. Number 1. The loss of personal space and identity. One of the very first things that begins to fade when you move in with your children is your own sense of space. It's not just about the physical room where you sleep. It's about the feeling of ownership over your life and surroundings. When you give up your home, your routines, and the familiar corners that once grounded your day, it doesn't always feel like a loss at first. But slowly, it starts to reshape the way you see yourself and the freedom you once had. You might tell yourself at first that it's simply a change of scenery, a practical adjustment, nothing more. But as the weeks turn into months, you begin to notice that you no longer have a place that feels entirely your own. Everything around you starts to belong to someone else: the kitchen, the living room, even something as small as the thermostat settings. You catch yourself hesitating before opening a cabinet, or wondering if sitting in your favorite chair too often is somehow taking up space in a house that doesn't truly belong to you. And then, almost without realizing it, a quiet question begins to take shape inside. Where do I fit in now? It's not about being ungrateful or creating conflict. It's about something deeper, how space anchors our sense of identity. Over the years, your home becomes more than just walls and furniture. It holds your rhythms, your memories, your dignity, the little rituals that remind you of who you are. When you leave that behind, even with the best of intentions, you sometimes trade your independence for a subtle but constant sense of obligation. I remember Harold, a 74-year-old man who moved in with his daughter after a mild stroke. At first, he felt nothing but gratitude and relief. But after a few months, small changes crept in. He caught himself whispering on phone calls so he wouldn't disturb anyone. He waited for permission to watch his favorite shows. He stopped cooking meals he once loved because the strong smells filled the kitchen, and he didn't want to be a bother. He told me, "I used to feel like a man with a home. Now I feel like a guest with a suitcase." That simple sentence stayed with me because it captured an experience many people feel but struggle to express. And it isn't just about pride. It's about autonomy. Having a space of your own, no matter how small, gives you the right to make simple choices every day. Those choices, what you eat, when you rest, how you spend your time, are reminders that you're still in charge of your own life. When that sense of space is gone, it becomes difficult to see where your identity has slipped away to. You don't stop being yourself, but the inner voice that once declared, "This is my home, this is my day, this is my routine," begins to grow quieter. And as that voice fades, you start to feel less visible, as though the world is moving around you without truly seeing you. Number 2, the shift in family dynamics and authority. Moving in with your children can quietly reshape the entire foundation of your relationship with them. You go from being the parent, the one who raised them, set the rules, and carried the authority, to someone who must now adapt to their household, their routines, and their decisions. It isn't that your children are unkind or intentionally dismissive. Most often, they're doing their best to be respectful. But the reality remains, when you live under someone else's roof, even when that roof belongs to your own children, the balance of authority shifts. Suddenly, you're adjusting to mealtimes you didn't choose, listening in on conversations you're not always part of, and watching decisions unfold without your input. You may notice your suggestions being gently brushed aside, or worse, quietly ignored. Not out of cruelty, but out of habit. The same child who once sought your advice before every major step now moves forward with plans, assuming you'll simply go along. For many older adults, this change feels subtle in the beginning, but over time it grows heavier. You're no longer the person others turn to for guidance or approval. Instead, you become the person updated afterward, once everything has already been decided. I think of Irene, a 72-year-old woman who moved in with her son and daughter-in-law after her lease ended. At first, she was relieved to have a safe place to stay, but slowly she noticed how her role in the family dynamic had shifted. The authority she once carried as a mother was replaced with quiet compliance. At the beginning, Irene was genuinely happy and deeply grateful. But as the months passed, she started to notice subtle changes in her place within the family. They no longer asked her opinion about weekend plans. They made household purchase decisions without consulting her. One evening, she sat quietly in the living room while her son and his wife discussed selling the very car she once drove. They didn't ask, they didn't even glance her way. They simply talked as if she wasn't there at all. That night, she shared with me, "I raised him to be independent. I just didn't expect to feel so irrelevant in the process." Those words carried a weight that went far beyond disappointment. Because this isn't about clinging to control. It's about dignity. The authority parents once held came from love, responsibility, and decades of experience. Losing that authority, especially when it slips away so quietly, can feel like you're disappearing from the inside out. And when your voice begins to fade within the very family you built, it raises painful questions about where you truly stand. It's not only a shift in roles, it's a shift in respect, in belonging, and even in how you view yourself. For many older adults, this slow erosion of their place in the family becomes one of the hardest truths to face. If you're still watching this video and finding these insights valuable, please comment number 2 below to let me know you're here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I encourage you to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. Your support helps us continue creating meaningful content to inform and inspire you. Now, let's move forward. Number 3. The disruption of long-standing habits and daily rhythms. When you've spent decades shaping your own life, setting your own routines, and building habits that reflect your personality and your needs, those consistent patterns become much more than simple tasks. They become a source of comfort, identity, and stability. These daily habits are more than just tasks on a schedule. They become a rhythm, a form of self-care, and even a quiet kind of therapy. Yet when you move in with your children, even the simplest routines can disappear almost overnight. What time you wake up, when you eat, how you take your coffee, the music you like in the background while reading, all of it can change without warning. Suddenly, you're not just adjusting to someone else's schedule. You're adapting to an entirely different lifestyle, one that may feel louder, faster, or simply unfamiliar. The pace of the household sets the new tempo, and you do your best to keep up, careful not to step on anyone's toes. Some seniors adjust more easily than others, but what many don't talk about is the quiet stress that comes with rewiring your entire day to match a rhythm that was never yours to begin with. And even when you manage to adapt, there's often a subtle guilt for missing the things that outsiders might see as trivial, but that once gave your life grounding. I think of John, a 76-year-old who never missed his morning walk at 7 a.m. He told me it was his moment of peace, the time when he felt most alive, watching the neighborhood slowly wake up, listening to the birds, and greeting familiar faces on the sidewalk. But when John moved in with his daughter and her family, mornings became filled with chaos. School lunches being packed, barking dogs, quick breakfasts, and everyone rushing out the door. His peaceful walk was pushed aside, and when he tried to reintroduce it, he was told it didn't really fit into the family's morning routine anymore. Eventually, he stopped asking. That silence, the quiet choice to stop asking for something he once loved, was the start of a long series of compromises that slowly chipped away at how John saw himself. What many people don't realize is that these daily routines are far more than simple habits. They are declarations of identity. They quietly affirm, "This is who I am. This is how I live. This is what brings me balance." When those rituals disappear, so does a vital layer of emotional grounding. You begin to lose not only comfort, but also the clarity of what kind of life you're living and who you are becoming. And as time passes, this loss doesn't always announce itself with dramatic changes. Instead, it creates a dull, chronic sense of disorientation, something hard to name, but even harder to ignore. Because the truth is, when your days no longer feel like your own, your life begins to feel like it belongs to someone else. Number 4, the loss of financial autonomy and decision-making. One of the most overlooked consequences of moving in with your children is the way it gradually affects your financial independence. At first, it may feel like a blessing and a relief. You save money on rent, utilities, and perhaps even food. But slowly, the reality of no longer managing your own household expenses begins to erode your sense of control over money. You might still contribute toward groceries or cover a portion of the bills, but the difference is striking. You are no longer the one setting the budget. And that change, though subtle, begins to weigh on your confidence and your independence in ways many don't anticipate until they feel it firsthand. Depending on the arrangement, your children may gradually begin to take over tasks like managing prescriptions, handling bank transfers, or scheduling appointments. All of this usually comes from good intentions, but it doesn't always involve your full participation. Sometimes these changes happen because you asked for help. Other times, they happen because it's simply assumed. Either way, the end result feels the same. You go from being the decision-maker in your own life to becoming part of a system you didn't design. And this loss is especially difficult when it touches choices that reflect your personal values. Maybe you've always supported certain charities, or you've enjoyed treating yourself occasionally to something special, but now you hesitate. You catch yourself wondering if buying that gift or making that donation might be seen as selfish, unnecessary, or impractical through someone else's eyes. I remember speaking with Leonard, a 78-year-old man who moved in with his daughter and her husband after a surgery. At first, it was a relief when they offered to handle his bills so he could focus on recovery. But months later, when Leonard wanted to order a birthday gift for his granddaughter or contribute to a local charity he'd supported for decades, his daughter would pause and ask, "Do you really need to spend money on that right now?" He told me that moment stung more than the surgery itself, because it made him feel as if he needed permission to be generous, something he had never experienced before. And here's the truth. It's not just about the money. It's about what money represents. Freedom, responsibility, and agency. The power to decide not just what you buy, but how you live and what values you honor. When those financial decisions begin to filter through someone else's priorities, the shift can leave you feeling managed rather than respected. And once that happens, it's not only your wallet that feels smaller, it's your sense of independence, your dignity, and your voice in your own life. You might find yourself second-guessing even the smallest choices, delaying purchases you once made with confidence, or quietly hiding minor expenses just to avoid the sting of judgment. This shift often doesn't come with arguments or ultimatums. Instead, it arrives quietly, almost invisibly, a slow narrowing of your freedom, like walking down a hallway that gets smaller and smaller each time you pass through. What makes this even more painful is that it usually happens in the name of love and care. Yet love without respect for your autonomy doesn't feel like care at all. It feels more like quiet confinement, a gentle but persistent reminder that your independence is slipping away. And the hardest part? It often happens without anyone even realizing the damage being done. If you're still watching this video and finding these insights valuable, please comment number 4 below to let me know you're here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I encourage you to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss future videos. Your support helps us keep creating meaningful content to inform and inspire you. Now, let's move forward. Number 5. The erosion of privacy and personal boundaries. Moving in with your children may feel like the ultimate act of family closeness, but that closeness almost always comes with a hidden cost: your privacy. Sharing a home doesn't just mean sharing rooms and walls. It means sharing routines, energy, and unspoken expectations. And over time, that closeness can blur the lines that once defined your personal boundaries. It might begin with the smallest things: someone walking into your room without knocking, your mail being opened by mistake, or your belongings being borrowed without anyone asking. At first, these moments might seem harmless, but gradually, they remind you of something important. You no longer have the same level of control over your personal space. On the surface, these incidents may seem small and harmless, but they reveal something much deeper. Your personal space, once safeguarded by the four walls of your own home, is now treated like open territory. And perhaps the hardest part is that you may not feel you even have the right to say anything. After all, you're living under someone else's roof, even if that roof belongs to your own child. You don't want to create tension, so you stay quiet. One small intrusion after another piles up until those interruptions become the new normal. There's a unique kind of exhaustion that comes from always being on, from constantly filtering your words, softening your tone, or wondering whether your presence feels like a burden. That emotional weariness builds slowly but steadily, especially when you realize you can't fully relax in the very place where you lay your head at night. I think of Evelyn, a 75-year-old woman who moved into her son's home after her husband passed away. At first, she felt grateful to be surrounded by family again, and she enjoyed the company. But little by little, she noticed she could never truly find a quiet corner of her own. The television was always blaring. The children rushed in and out of rooms. Her peaceful evening ritual, tea, soft music, a bit of journaling, was replaced by babysitting or helping with homework, often without being asked. She told me, "I used to have my little rituals before bed. Now I go to bed holding my breath, hoping no one knocks on the door." Those words capture the weight of what so many older adults feel but rarely admit. The loss of privacy doesn't just interrupt your habits, it erodes your inner calm. It can leave you feeling exposed, even if no one intends to invade your space. Because the truth is, when nothing you do feels entirely your own anymore, every part of your life begins to feel like it exists under someone else's rules and someone else's gaze. Boundaries are essential for emotional health at every stage of life. They are not about creating distance. They are about creating respect. When those boundaries begin to dissolve, you may find yourself questioning your role within the family. Are you still the parent? Have you become more like a roommate? Or are you slipping into the role of a live-in helper without realizing it? That kind of confusion doesn't just exist in the household. It begins to live inside your own mind. Slowly, you start doubting your right to ask for space, your right to rest when you need to, your right to simply exist as yourself without explanation. For someone who has spent decades living independently, carrying responsibilities, and making decisions, that kind of self-doubt can be deeply unsettling. It creates a constant sense of unease, as though you are both present and invisible at the very same time. Number 6. Emotional isolation and generational misunderstanding. Living under the same roof as your children doesn't always mean feeling emotionally connected to them. In fact, one of the most painful discoveries for many older adults is realizing just how lonely they can feel while being surrounded by family. Emotional isolation can creep in quietly, not because of neglect or cruelty, but because of something harder to define: generational distance. Your children, no matter how much they love you, are living in a world very different from the one you knew. Their priorities, their daily pressures, and the relentless pace of their lives all move on a track that often doesn't match your rhythm anymore. Conversations feel shorter, more rushed. Shared meals turn into moments dominated by screens and phones. And the things you truly want to talk about, memories, reflections, even your fears, start to feel out of place in the constant noise and busyness of a younger household. You may sit in the same room as everyone else, yet deep down feel like a visitor from another time. The laughter, the pace, the conversations, they move around you, but somehow they no longer include you. And even when someone pauses to ask how you're doing, you hesitate. Should you be honest? You don't want to sound dramatic, or worse, ungrateful. So you smile, nod politely, and say, "I'm fine," even on the days when you're not. I once spoke with Gerald, 79, who moved in with his daughter after a fall. He described how those first few weeks felt warm, filled with attention and care. But slowly, life for them returned to its normal rhythm: work, errands, deadlines, and endless busyness. Gerald would often sit alone for hours, waiting for the moments when the house finally came alive again. And when his family was home, they were often tired, distracted, or rushing off to the next thing. One evening, Gerald began to share a story from his years in the Navy, a memory he hadn't voiced in decades. His eyes lit up, his voice carried a spark of pride. But halfway through, his grandson interrupted, asking for the Wi-Fi password. In that instant, the story dissolved. Gerald wasn't angry. He simply realized there was no longer space where his world and their world could meet. That realization is a grief all its own. It is the loss of emotional relevance, the quiet slipping away of your place in the conversation. When your stories, your wisdom, even your humor no longer find a home in the very place where you live, the silence grows heavy. Over time, your inner world begins to shrink. You talk less, you share less, you cover the emptiness with polite smiles. Misunderstandings creep in, not from conflict or harsh words, but from absence. They don't truly know how you're feeling anymore, because somewhere along the way, you stopped telling them. And the reason you've stopped telling them is simple. Somewhere along the way, you felt they stopped truly listening. That's the hardest part of all. You still love them deeply. You still want to protect them, to cheer them on, to see them succeed. But how can you give when your own emotional well is running dry? And how do you refill yourself in an environment where your feelings have no safe place to land? This is where silence begins to take root. It isn't silence born out of peace, but silence born out of fear and self-preservation. Which leads us to something almost every older adult living with their children experiences: self-silencing to avoid becoming a burden. It is one of the most invisible sacrifices, and yet one of the most powerful. You start to hold back. You stop voicing your needs. You no longer admit when you're uncomfortable. And it's not because those needs disappear. They're still there, just waiting beneath the surface. But you choose to swallow them, convinced that speaking up would mean you're asking for too much. Have you ever felt that hesitation, that voice inside whispering, "Don't mention it, it's not worth the trouble"? Even in the most loving homes, this fear can quietly creep in. You don't want to be the reason someone changes their plans. You don't want to interrupt the flow of a busy household. And above all, you don't want your children, or their spouses, to feel that your presence is a weight they have to carry. So you stay quiet. You don't mention the noise that keeps you awake at night. You don't point out the aches that have gotten worse. And little by little, your silence grows. You don't mention how cold the house feels to your aging bones. You brush it off, telling yourself it's fine, even when deep down you know it isn't. At first, this silence feels almost noble, as if you're making a small sacrifice for the sake of harmony. But over time, it begins to take a toll. Every time you choose silence instead of honesty, you quietly teach yourself that your comfort, your feelings, and even your needs matter less. And slowly, the belief creeps in that your voice doesn't deserve space anymore. I think of Elaine, 73, a woman who had always been strong-willed and outspoken. She was the type who never hesitated to say what she thought or stand up for herself. Yet, after moving in with her son and his family, she found herself shrinking in ways she never expected. She stopped asking for help with groceries. She never mentioned that the new mattress was leaving her back stiff and sore each morning. When I asked her why, her answer was simple but heavy. They already do so much. I don't want to seem ungrateful. That single word, ungrateful, haunts so many older adults. It becomes the measuring stick for every request, every complaint, every moment of need. You replay it in your head before speaking up, and because you never want to cross that invisible line, you stay quiet. But the truth is, gratitude and honesty can live side by side. Being thankful doesn't mean you stop being human. Expressing discomfort doesn't erase the appreciation you feel, and suppressing your voice doesn't protect your family. It slowly disconnects you from them. Over time, self-silencing becomes a habit so ingrained that you don't even notice it anymore. You laugh when you want to sigh. You nod in agreement, even when doubt lingers inside. And gradually, you forget what it felt like to speak freely, to ask without guilt, to be seen fully as yourself. Not just as someone receiving help, but as someone still whole, still valid, still deserving of a voice. The truth is, your children may never directly ask you to silence yourself. Yet if the environment around you makes you feel as though you must, the result is just as painful. It becomes a quiet form of self-erasure, not because anyone demanded it, but because love and fear combined to make you step back, afraid of taking up too much space. And that is a loss many people never recognize. When you stop asking for what you need, you don't simply lose comfort. You begin to lose connection. Connection with others, and perhaps most importantly, connection with yourself. That's why the silence doesn't just echo in the room, it echoes inside you. Number 8. The loss of purpose and role within the family. As time moves on, one of the deepest changes older adults often feel after moving in with their children is the slow fading of their role. The responsibilities that once defined your days, the decisions you once made, the little tasks that gave shape to your mornings, all of these start to slip away. It doesn't happen in a single moment. There is no clear announcement, no dramatic declaration that your role has shifted. Instead, it happens gradually, almost unnoticed. You no longer plan the meals or decide what groceries to buy. You no longer keep the household list or fix the things that break. The phone doesn't ring with someone asking for your advice the way it used to. Over time, you become less of a participant and more of a witness in the rhythm of family life. That shift can be especially painful when you've spent decades being the anchor, the steady presence who solved problems, offered wisdom, and kept everything moving forward. Suddenly, your days grow quieter, less structured, sometimes even empty. And in that quiet, a new kind of loneliness emerges. Not the loneliness of being physically alone, but the loneliness of feeling unneeded. How does one fill that space when the very roles that once gave meaning and direction seem to have vanished? It's a question many carry silently, even when surrounded by the people they love most. I remember a man named Charles, 81, who had always been the steady hand in his household. He was the one who mowed the lawn every Saturday, balanced the checkbook without fail, and fixed the leaky kitchen sink before anyone else even noticed. These small responsibilities gave him pride and a sense of worth. But after moving in with his daughter, those roles slipped away. Whenever he offered to help, the response was often, "Don't worry about it," or "We've got it." At first, he welcomed the chance to rest. Yet as weeks turned into months, the absence of responsibility began to gnaw at him. He confided, "I just want to matter again. I want to feel like there's still something I bring to the table." His words carried a weight many older adults silently understand. This desire to contribute isn't about ego or control, it's about meaning. We are wired to need purpose, regardless of age. And when that sense of usefulness begins to fade, the days can start to feel strangely weightless, almost hollow. Even when family members mean well, when they try to ease your burdens and make life simpler, they may unknowingly strip away the very things that kept you grounded. The small tasks, the decisions, the sense that you are still needed. These are what keep life rich and fulfilling. Without them, you can find yourself drifting, asking quietly, "Where do I fit now?" It's not a dramatic question, but a soft, aching one that lingers in the background. Because when you no longer feel essential, when you no longer hold a role, you lose more than a task. You lose a piece of your identity. You stop seeing yourself through the lens of who you once were, the capable person who provided, guided, and held things together. Instead, you begin to see yourself only through the absence of what's missing. And that shift, subtle as it may be, is what makes the sacrifice of moving in with your children so deeply complex. It's never just about the space, the food, or the routines. It's about the quiet erosion of meaning. It's not just about giving up a house or a routine. It's about the slow disappearance of your place in the story you once helped write. That truth can be hard to face, but it is deeply real. If you've ever found yourself nodding quietly while listening to these words, please know you are far from alone. What we've talked about today is not rare, and it certainly isn't a sign of weakness or failure. It is the complex, emotional reality many older adults encounter when they make what feels like a responsible, loving choice, moving in with their children. But love does not have to mean sacrificing yourself. It does not mean fading into the background of someone else's life. You have spent decades shaping who you are, creating your rhythms, your voice, your role. That identity doesn't need to vanish just because your mailing address changed. Isn't it worth remembering that your essence is not tied to walls, but to the strength and dignity you carry? Each of the 8 experiences we explored today serves as a reminder that independence is not only physical, it is emotional, it is psychological. It's rooted in your ability to make decisions, to express yourself, and to wake each morning with a sense of purpose that feels authentically yours. And if you have surrendered pieces of that along the way, whether by choice or by circumstance, it's okay to grieve it. It's okay to say it out loud, and most importantly, it's more than okay to want some of it back. Because no matter where you live, no matter how life has shifted, you still deserve to feel seen, heard, valued, and respected for who you are. You still deserve a space where you can breathe freely and speak openly, without hesitation. Take a quiet moment to reflect. What resonated with you the most today? Which of these signs have you experienced in your own life, perhaps in ways you never put into words before? And what do you wish someone had told you years earlier when you first began this journey? Thank you for being here with us. Your presence matters. I would love to hear from you, so please leave a comment below and share one insight you're taking away from today's video and how you plan to apply it in your own life. Your voice is valuable, and your thoughts not only encourage me, but they also inspire others who may be walking the same path. Reading your comments gives us motivation, strength, and a sense of community. If you found this video helpful and meaningful, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share it with others. Your support allows us to continue creating thoughtful, practical content that informs, uplifts, and inspires. Thank you again for watching, and until next time, I wish you and your loved ones good health, lasting happiness, and peaceful days ahead. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you never miss a video.